Anyone who was actually.
Before we do that, can our architect up just to explain the detail on it, then we'll open it up.
Let's do that with us when we come back. We'll do the Q&A, then the architect will come and answer whatever questions. Yeah. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Tucker Gibbs with law offices at 3835 Utopia Court in Coconut Grove, and I'm here tonight representing the Feldman Companies, who own the property at 1396 Northeast 125th Street. I'm going to be followed by, if I might, by Henry Eiler, who is a professional planner who would be presenting testimony as an expert witness regarding this matter. And I also will be followed. He will be followed by Mr. Mitchell Feldman, who is my client. My client is a self-storage warehouse owner who built his industrial business in the city's industrial M1 district area, because that is or was the only place where it was permitted, and because it was the right place for an industrial storage facility, which has always been in an industrial area. Tonight you're being asked to approve a site plan for a self-storage warehouse on 123rd Street, east of US 1, in a commercial district, next to a medium-density residential neighborhood, and at the eastern gateway to your city. My client recognizes that this use currently is allowed here because the city has carved out this property as the one property in this zoning district that can be developed for a self-storage warehouse. But if this use is permitted here, it must fit in with the area's urban form. And with the purpose of the C2BE commercial district, which is, according to your LDRs, to enhance or make better the high-quality commercial areas along Biscayne Boulevard and Northeast 123rd Street corridor. Thus, you have an obligation to ensure that this proposal meets the city's site plan review regulations, which are part of the comprehensive plan, and the LDRs, which establish your standards for good urban planning. As proposed, this application fails to meet the city's requirements. The site plan does not comport with the comprehensive plan's future land use elements, specifically Objective 1.1, which requires redevelopment of a property if it incorporates a development pattern or urban form that achieves 4 or more of the following. And I'm going to talk to you about them and just give you our position. Mr. Eiler will talk about them in a little more detail. There's no evidence that was presented that this site plan directs development to specific areas that protect natural resources or ecosystems. There's no evidence presented that it promotes efficient use and extension of the public infrastructure. There's no evidence presented that it promotes a workable community and compact development. And there is no evidence that it promotes water and energy conservation, no evidence that it preserves open space and provides for public open space and recreational needs, and no evidence that it creates a balance of land uses, or that it creates an urban form that alleviates urban sprawl, or provides an innovative development pattern such as a transit-oriented development or a new town per Florida statute. And finally, there's no evidence that it presents incentives that incentivizes infill development. The site plan for a warehouse project in a commercial district does absolutely nothing to achieve any of these requirements. This site plan does not comport with the future land use element, objective 1.2, which states that the redevelopment is guided by transit-oriented development and livable urban form principles along major roadway corridors, including Northeast 123rd Street. And I heard the discussion that this could be considered a transit-oriented development because they've installed a bus stop. Well, this use does not generate any transit trips. Therefore, it cannot be considered a transit-oriented development. The insertion of a bus stop does not make it transit-oriented. These standards in Objective 2, there's nothing in the application and there's no evidence in the record that defines or addresses a living urban form principles, which is this project and this site plan is supposed to embody. There's nothing in the application that defines or addresses the urban form. Now, Elizabeth Plater-Zyberk, who's the former dean of the UM School of Architecture, defines urban form as a spatial arrangement of a particular environment as defined by the connectivity of built mass and form, the natural environment, and the movement of persons and goods within that environment. This site plan is for a warehouse. Its only activity within that warehouse is the storage of material. It does nothing to encourage the movement of people within this zoning district. This building is very attractive, but it's still a warehouse, which is an industrial building. It does not activate the sidewalk. It is over 100 feet of nothing along your 123rd Street commercial corridor that does nothing to encourage the pedestrian use of that street. Pedestrians do not use storage facilities. Good urban form is the lively, pedestrian-friendly development that creates a streetscape that encourages retail businesses and development. This warehouse includes no retail uses along the critically important 123rd Street commercial corridor that encourages the retail development of the area and pedestrians who use those retail stores. The warehouse loading dock shows a gate that would apparently visually shield the residential neighbors from the loading and unloading from trucks. But the loading bay should be further inside the building to ensure that the abutting residential neighborhood is also protected from the noise that comes with the loading and unloading of furniture and the like. The site plan also does not meet the applicable LDR design review requirements in section 3-204N. That the development as proposed conforms with the comprehensive plan, which we've discussed, and is otherwise compatible with the existing area or neighborhood development. This site plan for 121,000 square feet of storage is not compatible with an abutting medium-density, two-story residential condominiums and apartments. Nor is it compatible with the neighborhood commercial development on 123rd Street. If this type of use is compatible with commercial development, why is it allowed only on this property, abutting medium-density residential and at the gateway of the city, and only this property in this district? There's no evidence in the record that shows this site is compatible with its neighbors, where its loading area is back of the house, right next to these residential areas, next to a two-story residential condominium. 123rd Street, with the biggest FAR by far, it's 5 stories. It's next to the two-story residential building with no transition except small buffering in the street. It also creates a dead space along 123rd Street with no retail uses, which would activate that blank frontage and encourage pedestrians to use that portion of 123rd Street. And its access points are predominantly residential streets. That section also requires a site plan to provide vehicular access and configuration.
Council, I understand that we have to afford reasonable time to be heard, but we're really getting
I understand, but I
a
have to
little bit
establish a
extensive
record.
here. So
It's
if we can, I'm
quasi-judicial.
just asking you to wrap it up,
I'm going to, but I have to
just
establish
in respect
my
to
record.
the audience, to the others who want to be heard.
And I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. The section, but I have to talk about the section requiring the configuration that minimizes its impact on abutting and adjacent properties. It's inadequate because vehicular access is on 19th Street, a predominantly medium-density residential street, and the loading dock access is located where the building is closest to the least dense residential building in the area. It presents traffic conflicts that will will have negative impacts on the abutting and adjacent properties. So the site plan should be rejected. If you decide to approve it, condition it on the approval on the following: that it has to have retail frontage on 123rd Street. Bring the loading dock further into the building. Lower the height of the building to provide a real transition to the existing abutting two-story medium-density residential buildings.
Thank you.
And maybe that will help make that building consistent and compatible with the neighborhood.
All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Eiler? And then my client would like to speak. Mr. Eiler is my competent and substantial evidence.
May I briefly speak before Mr. Eiler presents?
Whoever gets to the mic first.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You're- I'm going.
No, she's making a statement. I mean, she gets to the microphone first. So, also this is in concordance with what you just presented.
That's why I said I'd have three people who would speak. Me,
Okay, so let's give him the opportunity to. Okay, all right, fair enough.
Good evening. My name's Henry Eiler. I'm a urban planner. I'm president and principal of Eiler Planning. We're based in Stuart, Florida, at 50 East Ocean Boulevard, Stuart, Florida, Suite 101. I have 38 years of planning experience, including 11 years as a principal planner and other planning positions with Miami-Dade County. I have 4 years as a Martin County Planning Director up in the Stuart area, and 23 years as a planning consultant. Most of my consulting work has been in Miami-Dade County for doing comprehensive plans and zoning codes for Miami Lakes, Florida City, Doral, North Bay Village, Coral Gables, a number of other cities. So I do have a lot of experience with the Miami-Dade County Code as well as the comprehensive plan. The purpose of my statement is to look at the consistency of the storage facility with the city's comprehensive plan and the land development regulations. As has been said, it's a 5-story, 120,000 square foot self-storage facility. I will note that the staff report did not note that there's also residential development for this site on the east side. Obviously, it was been talked about the south side. You have the two-story apartments. There's also 2-story apartments on the east side, along with the service station to the east as well. The zoning around the site is south and east. It's R5, which allows up to 16 units per acre. Those are the 2-story apartments. Also to the northeast across 123rd is low-density residential, 5 units per acre. You know those individual units there to the northeast of this site. The site is, I wanted to talk about the area height. The area height here, for the most part, is 2 stories. To the north, there is a relatively new 3-story building. But the normal trend of height in this area is 1 to 2 stories. This building will be by far the tallest, and it's right next to residential development. A couple of things I'd like to mention in the comprehensive plan. The staff report mentioned that the development is consistent with the comprehensive plan. However, it didn't go into detail. It just made that statement that it is consistent with the comprehensive plan. If you look at your very first goal in your future land use element, which is to encourage integrated transit-supportive redevelopment in order to enhance the city's economic base, improve the aesthetic quality of the built environment, and provide a range of housing and employment opportunities to serve and employ current and projected population. This project is not integrated with the surrounding area. It will be a industrial use, and in fact it is called an industrial use in your code, although it is permitted in this zoning district, which is commercial. It will be pretty much of an active, dead spot in this area. It's a decorative exterior, but there is no commercial or residential use behind it, especially one that will activate the street and really make this part of 123rd more active and pedestrian oriented. It is not transit supportive. Putting up a shelter over a bus bench really doesn't constitute that. But we're talking about the use itself, and there'll be little employment here. There's no housing provided. In fact, housing is being removed by this application. Redevelopment, as part of Goal 1, you have a second part. Redevelopment shall evaluate and promote the use of contaminated sites for commercial and industrial uses, discourage urban sprawl, emphasize enhanced livability and viability of residential, commercial, and industrial uses. There's nothing about this project I could see that enhances the livability of the area or the viability of adjacent commercial and industrial areas. The building is placed as close as possible to the residential areas to the east and south, with a 10 to 12 foot landscape buffer next to a 55-foot tall building. You can imagine living next to that across a fairly small right-of-way. As Tucker mentioned, Objective 1.1 lists a number of urban form criteria, and it's said that any development has to achieve at least 4, and I quite agree with the list that he read, that really none of these criteria are being met. Objective 1.2 established the land use designations that guide redevelopment through transit-oriented development, there's that term again, and livable urban form principles. It is not consistent with typical urban form principles that promote mixed use, pedestrian and street activity. It may look like a modern urban form, but it is a decorative exterior and does not really contain a true commercial or residential use behind it. It doesn't enhance or activate the street. Like I mentioned, it's placed as close as possible to the residential areas. You go from 2 stories to 5 stories in about 80 feet. The building is very close to those areas. The land development regulations require buffering, or this is policy 1.2.2 in the future land use element. The land development regulations shall require buffering and/or compatible transitions between all uses through regulation of building scale, design, building placement, open space, and use. The building is 5 stories in height. There is no transition. That 5 stories is right at the boundary line, placed as close as possible to the residential buildings on the south and east. It is not compatible with the existing scale of the area. Obviously, it's much taller than the current buildings. There is a fairly small 10 to 12 foot buffer on the residential sides. The self-storage is an industrial use according to your code and should not be adjacent to residential, and if so, should be heavily buffered. 10 to 12 feet is very, very narrow. The building should be pulled away from the residential areas, creating a much larger buffer, and the building height should be lowered to create an actual transition of scale from the residential to this industrial use. The city shall adopt guidelines, this is policy 161, shall adopt guidelines for unified urban design, architectural and landscape regulations for major corridors. Obviously, 123rd is one of your major corridors. Does not create a sense of place on this major corridor, and in fact could set the tone for future development on 123rd that does not encourage street or people activity. Placemaking strategies are supposed to be included with all redevelopment projects. These are parks, plazas, civic and cultural activities, and amenities shall be employed along major corridors. Where are any of these features in this project? They are not present. In your land development regulations, I believe Tucker has already mentioned section 3.204N1. This site plan does not meet the requirement to conform with a comprehensive plan, and in my view, which is one of the requirements of that section, and to be compatible with the existing area or neighborhood development. As I've already mentioned, I don't feel it is compatible because the scale and there is no scale or transition. The loading bays are directly across from the apartments, and access to the site is entirely from residential streets, and school kids use those streets. In fact, I was there today, and they were walking to and fro. Section 3.204N5, this does nothing to minimize the hazards or impacts on abutting or residential properties or the abutting or adjacent rights-of-way as required by this section. All access points use residential streets, as I mentioned. The building is closest to the residential areas with a very small buffer, and I've already said it would be better to really make a transition in scale and in actual physical location to create a greater buffer and a lower.
Again, if you can kind of speed it up, because you act like repeating a lot of statement over and over again. So
Almost done.
if we can get to the conclusion, it would be nice to the rest of the audience who wants to be heard.
Okay, I will do that.
Because making the same statement over and over again does not convince us any more than.
Okay. Finally, section 5, 1702 ET, loading and unloading of activities shall be limited to locations not visible from the adjacent public rights-of-way. There are loading docks clearly visible with a gate from the right-of-way, and they are accessed through a residential street. That does conclude my remarks. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. My name is Mitchell Feldman. I am one of the owners at 1396 125th Street. I'm their client. So I'm just a businessman. I don't have fancy speech or fancy talk. I'll just tell you how I feel and what's on my mind and why we're here petitioning this and objecting to the storage structure. I'm a storage developer. I was here 2 weeks ago when you 3-2 approved the storage facility in an industrial zone. And, you know, we spend a lot of money building self-storage facilities, and I get it. I know Sergio, and I know the Jerry Proctor, and I know Shubin and Bass. I went to school with Jeffrey Bass. These are people I know for years. And, you know, I'm here because this council made a decision where I followed the rules. I built in an M1 industrial district, and we built and delivered for the betterment of the community. We enhanced the neighborhood, and we built a beautiful storage structure in compliance. And lo and behold, in a location that was commercial where you couldn't build storage, and now with the new regulations, you still can't build storage, except there was a carve out for this one property. Why was there a carve out for this property? And the reason why, I mean, I went back to the commission notes. I have the notes here for the minutes from the meeting, where at the same meeting where the council was discussing that there should not be storage, but storage should be prohibited from North Bayshore Drive, 123rd Street, to the Griffin Canal, 125th Street, and the council agreed. And you even discussed that there should be no variances. But then when the petitioner stood up here and he made a request, he said, please don't make an economic decision to stop us from moving forward. And when you made that decision for him, you made an economic decision that hurt others who followed the rules, who built in the appropriate part of this town. We call it a carve out, not because we're making up a name. I mean, it's spot zoning. I mean, it is a carve out. And I use the word carve out because it says it here. It says they requested a carve out, and specifically in this language, it said the exception was for projects on 125th Street, and they're referring to 123rd, which have been designed and discussed with the CBD staff prior to May 17th, and which has been reliance by the property owner, proven to the satisfaction of the city attorney. So there was a specific carve out with language relating to this project. Clearly that no variance is required because the carve out has already occurred. So they're going to stand up and the attorneys are going to tell you, we don't need a variance, we're in compliance. But it's already occurred, the variance. And it was a carve out. And when I go forward and I keep looking at this, when you made the past actual regulation, the language changed, but it's still the same, that single property is the only property that could be developed for storage, to the economic detriment of others who did play by the rules. When I go into the regulations, it says that the purpose and intent is to protect and maintain a desirable living environment within the city of North Miami, I get that, and it makes sense. It further says in here that the purpose of the C2BE district, the commercial district, is to enhance high-quality commercial areas along Biscayne Boulevard and 123rd Street. High quality means activity. It means retail. This is 100 feet of a blank wall. It's decorative, and Ken Carlson is a great architect. He's talented. He's designed the project for me that we built. I know Ken. And it's a gorgeous building. It looks like an office building. It looks like retail storefront. And the pictures that you're going to see, there's a guy standing there with a backpack. There's a guy wearing a suit. There's a kid walking, there's two bicycles. And it looks like there's people coming to use an office building. And it looks like there are people coming to use retail shops. But that's not what you're getting. It further says in here, I'm almost done, please. It says in here, the purpose of the M1 industrial district is to accommodate industrial and related uses to the city. That's what it is. I want to also just highlight that you're talking about 121,000 square feet on a 33 and change thousand square foot lot. That's a building to land ratio of about 3.6. So 3.6 to a building to the land. In the entire CBD district, okay, I just kind of ran through public record, look at adjusted square feet in building, the average is 0.4. Our storage facility on 125th, was like 2.15. This is I mean, you call storage a low intense use, but this structure is very, very intense on this property. The last thing I want to say, and I'm done, so please just give me one more second. In the staff report, it talks about complying with comprehensive plan. But in fact, it does not meet your goals. It does not meet what we just discussed. It does not meet the objectives and policies of your comprehensive plan to enhance the street or for the betterment of the neighbors and the people behind you. It does not follow your intent of why you pass this. In closing, I would just like to say, you know, I appreciate my relationship with the city. You guys, staff has been great. And I think that we recognize that this building just doesn't belong here. And I hope you recognize it, and I encourage you to vote no.
All right. Public hearing is still open. Well, presentations, rebuttal.
Consider a rebuttal.
But are we gonna go back and forth? We can't.
I
Wait,
think-
no, we
yeah.
can't do the back and forth. You know, I mean, I can't do this. If you want your council,
Mayor, please,
huh?
please. I never do this.
Huh?
This is a new procedure, and we can discuss this afterwards and come up with other regulations and how you want to run this. But for tonight, please allow them to rebut. Please.
No, by his counsel, yeah, by his
counsel,
attorneys.
Yes, by his
But he doesn't have to keep coming to the
we're not
mic.
going to go through all that.
No.
Their counsel wants
Yeah,
to
but-
rebut, so just allow them to.
Yeah,
rebut.
so have the council come to the mic. But I can't have your counsel come to the mic so we can just get at it. So
Yeah, but our
that-
council is not familiar with some of the allegations and assertions that were made because they were not
but
involved during the
Mr.
process.
Attorney, but what if they
Just give
decide
them
to
whatever
go
time
come
you
back
want.
as
Give
well?
them whatever time you want for rebuttal, and then that'll be done with it, and you can have your public comment, and we can move on.
I'm happy if you want to limit me to a minute.
But is the council still going to come and speak?
Yes, because she's going to speak to the legality of the positions they've just taken. I just want to speak to the history of this and explain why so many of the statements that were made were untrue.
90 seconds.
I'll take a minute.
Mm.
Okay. I respect greatly Tucker Gibbs and his planner, and I guess to a lesser extent Mitch Feldman. They're extremely competent in what they do. They're very highly regarded, but they in many cases here pick and chose sections of the comp plan and the LDRs and the code and tried to apply it to this project. The bottom line is, as staff has indicated, this project comports with your current LDRs and with your current comp plan. If these people had any objection to what the comp plan and the LDR said, they should have been at the workshops and at the hearing and the planning commissions and the council meetings that we attended for 2 years, which led to the restrictions and regulations that we are now complying with. It's really disingenuous for a guy who's got a 120,000 square foot self-storage facility a mile away to stand up here and pretend he's doing this for the betterment of the city and not because he doesn't want the competition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Rachel Streifeld with the law firm of Shubin and Bass, 46 Southwest 1st Street, Miami, Florida. I do want to thank you for your time. I will be very brief tonight. I just want to make 2 points, as Mr. Dubin said, on the question of the legality. Your city attorney, Mr. Cazot, mentioned at the very beginning of this quasi-judicial hearing that the city cannot unreasonably withhold approval of a site plan that comports fully with your laws. Land development regulations are just like any other statutes. They are the laws that this council passed, and they are the laws that are in effect. So if Mr. Gibbs and Mr. Feldman had issue with the zoning code regulations or the uses that were permitted in the C2BE district, which this use is permitted, they had the obligation at that time during the appeal period to appeal those land development regulations, which they did not do. Your staff report touches on a number of different areas of expertise The city consulted its own experts. There was architectural review by the city's consultant architect, Sinilovsky Romanek Say, for architectural peer review and comments and a satisfaction statement. There were city staff review from city departments, particularly Public Works, that this development anticipates the impacts on water and sewer services. And your city planner, Ms. Wilson Sejour, has recommended approval. As well, there was the Development Review Committee that also recommended approval. And so with the parameters as they are, this project comports 100%, and there's more than enough evidence to support your vote of approval tonight. I do just want to take one more minute, if I could ask Mr. Feldman a handful of questions for the record, please.
Can you say that on the microphone just for those who?
She has the right to
I-
cross-examine. This is a quasi-judicial matter.
Mr. Feldman, would you tell the council where your residential address is?
10065 Bay Harbor Terrace,
Bay Harbor Terrace, and what municipality is that?
Bay Harbor Islands.
So you don't live in the city of North Miami?
Nope.
Do you own property in the city of North Miami?
1396 125th Street.
And what type of property is that?
I mentioned when I was talking warehouse.
It's a
Public
warehouse.
storage facility warehouse.
It's a public storage facility. And what's the name of that facility?
It's branded U.S. Storage Centers.
Okay, and do you own other U.S. storage centers?
I do.
Other U.S. storage centers within the Miami-Dade County?
Yes,
How many?
3.
Three
3
in-
total.
3 total, none in Broward County?
No.
Okay. And would you say that you sell the same storage services as other competing storage services, or is there something,
Yes, we sell the same thing.
okay. And is there any distinct way that you have been aggrieved tonight? As a resident of Bay Harbor Islands?
I mean, can I
I'm going to object to the question because it doesn't matter if he's agreed as
Mr. Gibbs is not on the microphone, so we're going to have to.
I do
I just
want
want to object to that question.
Okay, I'll retract that last question. The reason I went down this line, thank you, Mr. Feldman, I appreciate it so much. The reason that I went down the line of questioning about what type of business he engages in and whether or not he lives here in North Miami is because to object to a site plan approval or to any sort of approval on this property, an individual would have to be aggrieved by the action that you take tonight in a way that is distinct and more so than the general public. And that person, there's also a line of cases that talk specifically about commercial competition and economic competition. And I would advise and just highlight for the council, and I think the city attorney, I'd be more than happy to follow up and provide those cases that talk about voting for economic interests as opposed to the general overall. And I don't need to repeat myself about the limited discretion tonight on site plan approval.
Thank you very much, Council.
Thank you.
That's it? The public hearing is still open on the item
Mr. Mayor,
for
through you,
everyone who actually took the oath.
sure, through you to the city attorney, is are public comments now limited to
we
2
can-
minutes, or are they
Yes.
open-ended for
Yes,
everybody?
let me just mention. Okay, so the reason we allowed the testimony to go a little bit further than normal is this is an affected party, so we allowed them to make their case, build their record. If they decide to file a lawsuit, I did not want the city to be named in that lawsuit because we did not allow them an opportunity
But
to be
from
heard.
this point
So
forward,
from
it's
this point
public
forward,
hearing. We
if
go
they're
back to
not-
2 minutes.
If they're not representing either the applicant or an affected party, they've got the 2 minutes and
Okay.
we move on.
Cool.
Thank you. Karen DeLeon, 1935 South Hibiscus Drive. I won't speak to the legalities of it, but I will speak to some confusion. We speak about wanting developers to come into this town. We speak about issues with traffic. We've made a decision to zone this C2BE, which my understanding does include self-storage. My understanding is that comment about storage not being available from Bay Shore to Griffin, but we already have this gentleman's property there. With all the issues we're having with traffic, overcrowded schools, sewage, various city services, it just sadly kind of makes sense that self-storage would actually be a good use of this property. I would love to be able to have a very pedestrian-friendly area everywhere, but the reality is we live in houses that don't have storage, and having storage nearby, a lot of people are using it these days. We don't have attics, we don't have basements. So in certain ways, it will be used by residents that are living nearby. I'm a little concerned going forward that the next person who wants to have a restaurant, a bakery, a bar, a beauty shop, that they want to come before you with a site plan, that somebody else owning those same services nearby is going to be here with their attorneys. So going forward, I just hope that we can evaluate how this process works, because as a resident looking at it, it concerns me that the people that have several self-storage units, that have the money to hire attorneys, et cetera, that we're going to become more of a city of the big brands, and we're going to lose a lot of mom and pops if that's going to be the case down the road. I could be totally off, but this is just an impression looking at it. Thank you.
Public hearing is still open. Public hearing is still open.
Good evening. William Welsh, 1180 118 Road. When we did the comp plan about a year ago, I guess, that property was spot zoned to 100 or something feet. They agreed to downzone it, and it was commercial at that time. We're talking about the property right next door to them and asking for, they want to go up over 100 feet or 99 feet in a high density. These people are putting up a premier piece of property, a premier structure that could be in Coral Gables. It's the same design, architects, and everything. Having a self-storage unit that looks like something out of Coral Gables could only benefit our community. We talk about the east side always being negative about development. You have a project that we are supporting, that we like, that we will use, and we don't really have any objections to it. So there should be no objection by the city council to a project that's going to benefit the city and maybe bring in more projects that will benefit the city that the residents truly want, and will create employment for the city and be what we want and make the city what we want. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, City Attorney, City Clerk, and City Manager. The current building out there, the current, I think, 3 apartment buildings, does not do anything for the neighborhood. I can tell you that. I go by there every day. However, putting a storage facility out there doesn't add any value to the economic development of this city. At this location, this facility should be either in the industrial park by Channel 2, or I don't even think it should be in the Chinatown district, since we designated that. And there's one behind my mom's house at 645 Northwest 132nd Street. This facility is in the wrong location. It sends a message that we're the city of self-storage, number one. Number two, you're taking a prime piece of property, it should be retail. I wish Tobco will buy out the whole block and build something nice there. Something that will be cool and, thinking outside the box. However, this does not add any jobs. This does not add any value to our economic development. This doesn't add anything to the city except a 5-story building. Let's call a pig a pig. You can dress up a pig and it's still a pig. This is a self-storage facility. I don't care how you put it around. You can say it's in Coral Gables, but it does not create any jobs. It doesn't create any value. It doesn't create any tax base. It doesn't, we need to start thinking forward as a city. Thank you.
Good evening. Bob Pasham, 13005 Coronado Terrace. Competition certainly gets people's juices flowing, but I think that this is a site plan review. The conversation about whether there should be a self-storage unit there or not, I think that train's already left the station. That was decided long ago. So this is to take a look at the project and see if you think it fits appropriately. I'm a neighbor, and you've heard from some other neighbors. I think it's an attractive building. It's low impact as far as I'm concerned for the neighborhood. It's not generating tons of traffic. There's no backup on 123rd because you can't access the building from 123rd Street. It's not a big box storage unit. It's designed for it's perfect for the neighborhood. It's designed for people that need additional space, and there's plenty of us that need that. I've seen this proposal before. They've got a generator in case of power outages, so people's perishable items are preserved. I think they've done a lot of things to make this a high-end boutique, if you will, self-storage facility, and it's in the right place. I'd suggest you approve it, please.
Laura Hill, 13075 Griffin Boulevard. Bob used the term "the train has left the station." I was going to use the term "the ship has already set sail." We've already discussed the zoning and variances for this property in a number of comprehensive workshops and LDRs. I believe the city attorney gave you instructions on this process that if this building fits in with all of the LDRs, and there's no problem with our city code and our municipal regulations, that it is up to you guys to approve it. It's not up to anyone here tonight to decide what goes on to that piece of property. And as much as I don't want to see North Miami become the city of storage facilities, you can't build a city on what you wish would come here. We have a business that doesn't need any kind of variances. It's an attractive building. I actually like the site plan. I think it's very attractive, and it will lift up the area. So I think it's the responsibility and duty of council to approve it, and I support that. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name's Annie Montgomery, 2082 Laurel Lane. I'm in favor of this development or building. I guess I've sold a few properties around there, and I think there is a need for storage for some of these townhomes and condominiums and apartments. They can even walk to their storage, which is great. Be very little traffic as far as automobiles, and I'm very much in favor of it. It's an attractive building, maybe a little bit more landscaping, but I really think we should approve this. I'm asking you to approve it. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jerry Cariglio. I live at 2315 Magnolia Drive in Keystone Point. I think this would improve the livability for two reasons. Number one, as someone that drives by there every day going to my office, traffic is always a concern, and I think this is a much better use than more retail or more apartment buildings. Number two, as someone that lives in Keystone, I think that we need a nice, convenient storage facility right next to Keystone, and that's why I think the council should approve it. Thank you.
All right, public hearing is still open.
It's been an interesting night. I was just wondering where in our rules and regulations for timing, the additional, not 2 minutes, but 6, 7, 8, 10 plus minutes occurred. And then in the middle of the same hearing, the same agenda item, it then reverts to 2 minutes. I don't know exactly how that happened. And I don't know how earlier, despite sending an email, Scott, to everybody in capital letters well prior to the agenda, you didn't read it. But I got cut off. So without debating the people that are in opposition, except for the amount of time allocated, which I'm not familiar with, I find it very curious that our efforts in this city are to uphold again and again the most banal of projects, despite the architectural abilities of doing the best with this. But it is insane that we keep on pushing warehouses, dollar stores, car dealerships again and again and again. I mean, is the public aware that right next door to this parcel, there was a 290-plus unit development proposed that's been worked on for years and years of luxury housing with great landscaping, with restaurants, with 2 pools on a raised pool deck, and that didn't pass. They were given hell for doing something that they bent over backwards to accommodate the city with the setbacks and really designed three-dimensionally, really designed quite well. But we're here to entertain putting up more self-storage. I think we really need to check this out, and I think maybe that's the reason we're having a $155 million bond coming up, because we don't know how to
All right, thank
reinforce
you.
our tax base.
If there is anybody else who wants to be heard, this is the opportunity to be heard on public hearing for this item.
Good evening. My name is Gerald Selin. I live in 1070 Northeast 147th Street. Where I live in the alley, it's very disgusting. It stinks. People throw everything they
Mr.
have.
Sterling, you have that's for Citizen Forum.
I spoke to.
This is the time for this item only, for this storage facility which is being presented to us.
So who I can speak with?
In Citizen Forum or to the manager. You could have talked to me too. I'm your doctor. Remember?
It's on the calendar today. We have that scheduled by Public Works to do the alleyway. It's on.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hector Medina, 1270 Northeast, 124th Street. We strongly oppose putting a storage unit on 123rd.
Evan Ross on behalf of the applicant. So I know everyone's used to listening to the experts and the attorneys and
Your address, please.
Sorry,
I forgot to-
17301 Biscayne Boulevard. And sometimes the technicalities of things fly over people's heads. So I just want to simplify a little tonight. We heard from Mr. Gibbs, who argued tonight that you shouldn't have zoned this particular property this way. That's not what you're voting on tonight. What you're voting on tonight is simply whether this property complies with your site plan review regulations. And your staff has been clear that it does, in fact, comply with those regulations. But let's be clear about what this is. You have a self-storage business that doesn't want competition. You heard that very clearly from them, both directly and on cross-examination tonight. Their attempts to try to convince you that it doesn't meet your code have fallen short, as your staff has made clear, once again, that it does. They talked about changes to design. They talked about adding a buffer. This proposal requires no variances whatsoever and entirely conforms with your code. Mr. Feldman talked about spot zoning, and while we'll disagree that this was spot zoning, again, that's not what you're here to make a decision on this evening. As Ms. DeLeon said, you wouldn't turn away a brewery because you had another brewery in the city. You wouldn't turn away a steakhouse because you have another steakhouse in the city. Competition is a part of our American capitalist system. So I'll close very simply and reiterate. Your staff has made very clear tonight that we meet the requirements for site plan approval. This is not a question of what kind of business someone wants there or doesn't. It's simply a question of whether this conforms to your code. And as you've heard tonight, it does, so we ask for your approval. Thank you.
Okay, public hearing is now closed on the item. We now come to the dais for the members of the council to voice their concerns and comments.
I'm ready to make a motion if nobody else on council wants to have discussion. I make a motion to approve the item.
No, I have a question.
He has a motion, so you want to second it?
I'll withdraw it. I'll withdraw it so he can ask his question. I didn't know he was going to ask questions.
Okay. I have a question for staff. 2 weeks ago, you came before us and described a self-storage as an industrial business, and now you said it's a commercial business. Can you explain the difference between that facility and this one?
Well, the prior facility that was approved was located in the M1 district on Dixie Highway. This use, although it was not permitted in your previous LDRs, was a part of the recent amendments that were made in 2016 to allow for it to become a permitted use. So even though it's industrial by definition, in terms of the use being permissible, based on the policy direction that the council gave in the 2016 amendment, it made it permissible.
No, I'm talking about the project himself, like
Correct.
a self-storage. You consider it a self-storage?
It meets the
as an-
definition of industrial.
Okay. And now you describe that one as a commercial, in a commercial district.
Your district is commercial. Your district doesn't change. C2BE is defined as a commercial district in your code. However, by your policy direction with the text amendment, you now made it permissible in the C2BE district.
Okay. West to the storage, what do we have there?
West
Like
of the storage,
yes,
you have
on
a
123rd.
vacant parcel that's
Okay.
there. That's the item that
Which
you
is
reviewed
consi-
last
which
year.
is zone as what?
It's currently C2BE.
The commercial.
Correct.
Thank you.
No.
I would make a comment before we do that. This property is, right now, it is a very blighted apartment building. And I have spoken on this for a couple years, and where our attorney said we cannot vote based on opinion, we're voting strictly on the fact whether it comports. We've already voted on the LDRs to allow a self-storage on that property. It's a good use for the neighborhood. We have, to the west, we have staff trying to put a 150-unit building. So the setback, what happens when we put 150-foot or even 100-foot residential there? There's not going to be a transition on that one. We have people coming to the city. We have developers. We are going to be looking for a lot of high intense residential. We can use the storage. But I have spoken, there is nobody that I have spoken to in the neighborhood, my constituents, nobody has complained of this property. Because if I had a lot of complaints, I would take that in consideration. But from a lot of the residents who are up here complaining about development or anti-development constituents, they are in favor of this project. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Vice Mayor. I want to make one last comment before we go to a motion. Had I been presented with this item before we did the carve-out, which is eloquently expressed that yes, this was a carve-out, and also had the attorney, our attorney, not made the statement that legislative discretion is inappropriate when resolving the issue of compliance. So far as the project meets the requirement, the administrative requirements, and it is not in our purview, even in our purview, to go against it as long as they meet the administrative requirements. So that being said, why is this being presented to us if it meets the administrative requirements? So CPND should have just given the go-ahead. No?
It's Alex's fault, and Alex ain't here tonight. This is, no, Councilman DeSolme brought this up when he got upset about the facility out at Northwest 7th and 135 and said that anything needing similar approval should come before us. So we went along with Alex's suggestion, and now we're going to see every single meeting turn into this.
So I mean, yeah. So I think this is a was it by resolution we made that, or was it? Oh, that's in the LDR. So this is something that needs to be revisited, because if this is an administrative decision and we are policy makers, we are not administrators. So the buck should have stopped with you guys. And again, the carving out should have been dealt with when it was being made. And someone made the comment of that the train has left the station or the ship has left the dock. And that is, in fact, the reality. And it's a law. Sometimes the laws are not good, and we still have to go by the laws. So that needs to be revisited. No, seriously.
Mayor, we're actually meeting
Okay.
to bring back some changes to the LDRs, just some additions, things like that we've seen in, since the LDRs have been implemented. I've already told staff we're only doing this once, So we're bringing all the typos, all the errors. We're going to take this as guidance that you do not want site plans.
No,
reviewed
to
by the
come to us,
council.
unless, I guess, or unless there is a strong opposition, by neighbors or whatever. I don't know. I mean,
We'll be bringing you back a
No, but-
change that takes those out of the LDR.
But I have a question, Mayor,
Yeah.
Mayor, for the city attorney. We're not the only city where you need a site plan approval by council. We're not the only one. And
It's not
secondly,
It's not common, which is why we
we're not the
recommended
only
it.
one.
We're not the only ones, but
Okay.
we recommended against
But
it.
secondly,
so what
that
we're doing tonight
legislation-
is simply a show, right? The decision has already been made by staff. So we cannot. You said it. Legislative discretion is inappropriate when resolving the issue of compliance, especially when the project has already met the administrative codes. I mean, so why are we even laboring over this? So this is, this is a waste of time. Or you could have just made a presentation just for the general public, and to me, it's a moot issue. It was a moot issue way from the inception of this whole meeting. Okay? So let's use our time more wisely.
I'll make a motion to move approval of the item.
Second.
Have a motion made by Councilman Galvin to approve tab G. The motion was seconded by Councilwoman Keys. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for voting, Councilman. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Item passes with a 3-1 vote. Tab H. Proposed resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of North Miami, Florida, adopting and appropriating funds in the amount of $262,500 to be funded in the amount of $137,000 from the Law Enforcement Trust Fund, $37,500 from the Federal Equitable Sharing Fund, and $88,000 from the Federal Equitable Sharing Fund, and providing for the appropriation and expenditure of those items as set forth in Exhibit A, providing for an effective date and for all other purposes.
All right? Anything from staff?
Just quickly, this is a procedural matter that we bring the appropriation of these funds from the Law Enforcement Trust Fund for legislative approval. Those funds, as you guys know, come from forfeitures that happen throughout the year, our portion, and they are generally, they have restricted uses, equipment, training, some community outreach programming. So this is just a standard recommendation for the year.
But usually we always have a presentation by the police department.
They're prepared to do so.
Details on.
They're prepared to do so. I just wanted to make it, to simplify it for you.
All right.
That was it.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Larry Jariga, Interim Chief of Police. I'm joined by George Manresa, our Police Administrator. Tonight we present to you our request to appropriate the funds, $262,500, for a variety of different expenditures, including community projects, crime prevention awareness projects, training, also for investigative purposes where our detectives will travel out of town, or to utilize funds to obtain resources for our investigations, and awards, as well as general equipment, and again, law enforcement, travel, and transportation.
How much money is for community policing?
For our community projects, out of the Law Enforcement Trust Fund, $10,000, out of the Justice Fund, $5,000, and out of the Treasury Fund, an additional $5,000.
20,000?
I'm sorry?
20,000?
Total of 20,000 with crime prevention and awareness for safe neighborhoods, an additional 45,000. So a total of 65,000.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move approval.
Oh, yeah. Is there anyone in the public who wishes to be heard on the item? Item H as in hot. Hot, 105. I see no one here, no one, so public hearing is closed.
I'll make a motion to approve the law enforcement expenditure.
Second.
I have a motion made by Councilman Galvin to approve tab H. The motion was seconded by Mayor Smith Joseph. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Thank you very much, Chief.
Item passes with a 4-0.
And at this time, we'll open citizen forum, right? This is the time for you to be heard on any subject, item, concern that you may have, but do not ask us any questions because we cannot answer any questions from the dais. But you can.
Hello, everybody. Marisol Medina at 1270 Northeast 123rd Street, 24th Street, sorry. I just wanted to say thank you for involving us in the conversation with the storage. I liked that they were up here talking about it and discussing it in front of us versus behind closed doors where we don't get to hear anything. It's all kind of a mystery, and then it comes before us. So I just appreciate that. I hope that even though it did consume time, it goes forward and we continue doing that. Thank you.
Jim Garrett, 11610 North Bayshore Drive, North Miami. Number one, I think the councils, I think the city government and the councils should follow up on FIU and what the plans are for that property out there. I know this personally. We need a medical facility in this area and a hospital. I wish you. I'm not going to go there. I've been dealing with hospitals with my mom, and I've been dealing with hospitals with myself. We have Mount Sinai, we have North Shore, and we have Jackson North. We need a hospital in this area, and that land south of the Coven Center will be a good use for a medical school hospital towards LGBT issues and towards senior citizen, or I forgot, there's another term for it. Doctor, you probably know. That will be a good, and also the med students and the doctors and the nurses and the professionals that will come if FIU decide to locate a med school there. Think of the economic development and the economic impact in our community. And the dorms out there and the parking garage and the citizens. We will have health care within our community again. I remember back almost 30 years ago, we had a city councilwoman, her husband, and the sitting governor of the state of Florida that closed down a hospital over here in North Miami. And the impact it had on 525 employees. We need to get a hospital back in this community. That's the first thing. And then the second thing, thank you.
Thank you. Citizen Forum is still open?
Yes. Good evening. My name is Stedman Stahl. I'm the newly elected president of the Dade County PBA, and we've just been going around and introducing ourselves to the new mayor and councils of the different jurisdictions that we represent. And I've got with me tonight my executive vice president, John Jenkins, and my sergeant at arms, Robert Davis. And we got our board of director back there, Mike Clifton. I just wanted to come by and say thank you, and it's refreshing. I just saw that last item of a mayor and council and a manager that puts public safety first. It was nice to see a unanimous vote on that equipment that they needed. And on a side note, I have the distinct privilege of representing the officers of North Miami. You have one of the finest police departments in this community, and you've got a great acting interim chief back there that needs to be made permanent chief. He is absolutely a product of your community. I believe he's worked for the city for over 31 years. He's been a police officer for 24 years. He's gone through the ranks. He's coached in this community, and I think he's been the acting for about interim chief for about 8 months. And I thank the manager and the attorney. But maybe it's time to make him. Let's take that interim off and make him a chief. I think you guys got one of the finest chiefs out there. I've seen him in the community. I've seen him representing this town. He does a great job. Thank you very much, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Citizen Forum is still open in the city of North Miami, regularly scheduled council meeting. Citizen Forum is still open.
William Prevotel, 11950 North Bay Shore Drive. I'd have to duplicate the sentiments, and I support Interim Chief Jurega being made permanent. But I tell you the truth, I really have no faith that such a smart move will be made, and that we're going to wait further and further, and probably nothing will happen or something more upsetting will happen. Scott and Carol, thanks for that vote on the storage center. Both of you guys spearheaded us selling Biscayne Landing land at $400,000 an acre when it could have sold for more than $10 million an acre on the open market. You guys have held back development in our community for year after year after year. And I'd like to propose that the upcoming $155 million bond issue be in your names. I think it should be, your name should be all over that now we have to go out with our hat for $155 million. I'm not going to read the second page that I start off with, but it concluded with, thank you, Council, for considering condemnation of bigotry and racist comments while calling for our community to steadfastly unite and guard against the rise of injustice and oppression. I sent an email to everybody there, to 20 people in the city. I did not hear back from one person. It was in capital letters. It said North Miami Agenda, addition to the agenda, North Miami Council. Scott, I didn't hear back from you. It was well before the agenda was sent out. I didn't hear anything from you. I didn't hear anything from any of the cowardly people up there. Nobody felt the need to address this issue publicly? Really? When we have somebody excreting on our community like that, and you had no need to publicly bring this before us? I called for not myself to speak singularly, but for our entire community to be able to speak on this issue. And yet there was no support for it? We're going to cower away? Good God.
Thank you very much. And
Mr.
if I may make one request, please. Anyone who comes to the microphone, I would strongly urge you to not repeat any of our names. To not. I mean, it's simply not cool, and not in a negative way. If you are addressing to the council, address to the council. If you're making a statement, make a statement. But yeah, I know. But please refrain from citing any council person's name while you are talking, and refrain from all the applauding and everything. This is not an entertainment session. This is a council meeting.
Mr. Spring, can you ask somebody to quickly print off the PR that went out, the press release that went out from all five of us together condemning the comments of the president? Apparently, Mr. Prevotel must have missed that. I saw your email, and we can talk after this meeting as to why I didn't respond.
Okay. All right.
Good evening. Hello.
Hello.
Is everybody here? You know, code enforcement is my pet peeve. So we're getting into tax season, income tax season, and I'm beginning to see the signs all over the swales in the city. I sure hope code stops it right away, because we get hundreds of them. So we got to stop it right away. And somebody said, when you see a pig, you call a pig a pig. I like pigs. They're nice, clean animals. Thank you.
All right. Citizens Forum is still open, but I see no one coming forward. So Citizens Forum is not closed. If anyone on the dais have any reports, please let it be heard at this time.
Mayor, before you do reports, we had something that should have been on the agenda item, but it wasn't. You guys have board appointments. So I don't really want to do
Well,
it
board
during my
appointments can be
reports.
made anytime.
So you want to do it before or now or after?
You mean, well,
We only have one.
do we have any?
I just have one.
We have,
Hmm?
I have two in total. One for Councilman Bename, one for Councilman Galvin.
Okay, I'll do my next meeting if I have any.
I'd just like to nominate Rebecca Pelham to serve on the Downtown Advisory Committee.
So I have so Councilman Galvin would like to appoint Rebecca Pelham
Pelham
to the Downtown Action Plan Advisory Committee and Councilman Bien-Aimé.
I don't have the application. I'll do that. I'll do it next week.
You don't want to. Put this kid on. This is the note that I have. He was already there. It's a written comment.
Yeah, that's fine for the university.
Okay.
But,
No. Yeah. Exactly. And Councilman Bien-Aimé would like to reappoint Jason B. Peer to the University Relations Board.
Is there, what about for the healthcare? There is some healthcare board or something like that?
I don't know.
Because-
These appointments are made when the council.
Okay,
says-
I'll do my next meeting.
Right. So when you guys send us, okay, so do I have a motion to approve the appointments that I just stated on the record?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion made by Councilwoman Keys to approve the proposed board appointments. The motion was seconded by Councilman Galvin. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Item passes with a 5-0 vote. Thank you.
The council reports now?
Briefly, tomorrow, Chamber of Commerce, North Miami Greater Chamber of Commerce is holding its lunch at the Joe Celestine Center, and we will be honoring the Police Officer of the Year. So who can still come, I think you could probably at least still come. Recommend it'll be a nice luncheon. Also, in addition to Councilman Bien-Aimé's workshop on the bond, I will also be holding a workshop at the request of residents, constituents, and I believe the date's going to be February 7th, probably, Arthur said 7th? Okay. Well, we'll give you the details, but there will be an additional workshop February 7th. Thank you.
Like Councilwoman Keys just said, on Thursday we're going to have a workshop at Griffin Community Center starting at 6 p.m. about the GOB. We encourage that every real residents, homeowners, to come that night to participate. We're going to talk about real numbers. It's not going to be just a presentation by staff, try to sell you the project, but we're going to have real numbers, discussion about the numbers, and everything, then you can decide in what direction you want to go. Also, this weekend, we're going to have the Haitian American elected official in the city of North Miami for 2 days, and about 47 elected official Haitian American and will be in the city of North Miami. We have 2 events, and you can visit our website for more information about it. It's going to be Friday and Saturday. Over 47 elected officials from Haitian descent has confirmed. And I have a question for staff about the passive park and on 135th Street. And from my understanding, you guys, after we've been renamed the passive park and staff, we have ADA requirement that need to be addressed.
Yeah.
And as of right now, I don't see any movement about it.
Yeah, we will be addressing Councilman Bien-Aimé. There are some issues at some of the crossings. We have to be careful because of like some drainage issues, but we will be addressing those actually in the next couple of weeks.
What up?
During the initial,
You're not speaking.
That's fine. During the initial, once we did it, designate the passive park, I did reach out to the current homeowners president, Carol Prager. She's no longer there. I have made contact with the new homeowners president. We're going to be getting together. I made contact with him at the end of the year, and we're going to be getting together to go ahead to get the design done for what we're going to do there for the passive park.
Yeah, but at the same time, you're talking about ADA requirement, what the homeowners have to do with that.
Yeah. It'll be a part of it. Yes, we will be on it.
All right. That's it?
That's concluded. Yeah.
Nothing? The only announcement I have to make is tomorrow we have a TPO meeting, transportation planning, used to be known as MPO. This is a good opportunity, at least for us to be represented at the level of at the county level, where we deal with issues of transportation and transit for the entire county. So of note, I want to also mention that for the past couple of days, there's been some way somehow there's been some kind of campaign about Brightline. For those of you who may not know, Brightline is the new train that has started their circulation. I think they started from Fort Lauderdale upward, going toward Palm Beach, and since they're trying out, there has been some accidents. About 4 deaths actually. 4 deaths so far from the few weeks that it's been in operation, and some of the elected officials have called upon the leaders and the stakeholders of Brightline to even cease circulation at this time until they can put more, I guess, cautioning signs and so forth. But the reason why I mentioned that is that Brightline is a part of the all aboard a transportation system, that comes all the way from Orlando, supposed to be from Orlando to downtown Miami. But what concerns me, the reason why I'm bringing this point is because of the SMART plan. The SMART plan is a project that consists of 6 legs, and one of which is the Northeast Corridor, where we are part of, and the FEC track is the one that they plan to use, which goes north-south, right on east of 14th Avenue, crossing 123rd Street, 135th and 123rd. And reason why I'm mentioning this is because at the meetings, they simply concentrate more, and I've voiced that many times, more on the other legs as opposed to funding and even looking at our leg, the leg that actually concerns us. So I am the only mayor from the Northeast Corridor that sits on that board because we are the only population with 50,000 or more. And on the west side, we have Miami Gardens. So it's good for you. It would be good for you to actually take part in those meetings to make your voices heard. Not just mine. We need that visibility. We need to open that conversation so that we are not left behind on that big transportation movement that is being taken place in the entire county. That being said, I will remain here, Smith Joseph, for the city of North Miami. Mr. City Attorney, do you have any report?
No, Mayor.
Mr. Manager?
Just quickly, I just wanted to, I know I sent out a memo. I'll be traveling to Tallahassee tomorrow and Thursday, meeting with members of the legislature, with the city attorney, and we will be advancing the city's legislative agenda, our priorities that you guys have laid out. So just wanted to let you know that ahead of
Can you name some of the priorities?
I have a huge binder, but I can tell you your senior center is one of the ones in that binder, sir. So, but it'll be a quick 36 hours up and back, but we probably have right now about 9 or so meetings, and I'm gonna try to get a few more set. So just wanted to let you know.
Mr. Clerk is gone. Within a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.